They're called lazy, entitled, addicted to iced coffee, and allergic to hard work. I keep hearing Gen Z can't even pick up the phone or even know what this means, or they just want to be TikTok famous. But I wondered, is any of that actually true? As a parent of a Gen Z and someone who's worked with dozens of them, I wanted to find out if we've completely misunderstood an entire generation. In this episode of More Moments, I sit down with my son Benjie, the 21-year-old, right at the heart of this generation, to bust the biggest myths once and for all. We talk about ambition, AI, cancel culture, mental health, iced lattes, and what hope really looks like for the future. So, are Gen Z really lazy? Or are they evolving faster than the rest of us can keep up? Let's find out. Welcome to More Moments. Today, we're going to be doing some Generation Z myth busting. And I'm joined by Benjie, who at 21 years old is right at the heart of this Generation Z. Welcome, Benjie.
Hi, I think this is going to be really good fun. We can have some good laughs on this one.
Well, very interestingly, I keep hearing on the TV, reading on social, that Generation Z are potentially a little bit hopeless. The thing that I heard on the TV last week, which made me laugh, is that, and I'm just reading from here, Generation Z can't even pick up the phone and say hello. You only know how to text or send memes. And more than that, none of you know what this means. And is this true?
I think let's pick that step by step. And firstly, I'm going to back my generation a little bit and say that we aren't hopeless. I have a lot of hope for my generation and for all of them. I think as every generation goes by, we like to pick on the next ones. I'm sure we'll do it to whoever's next. And it will be consistently, they're rubbish. They don't do this. No. But looking at the phone in particular, I think we tested this on my younger sister and myself the other day. And thankfully, we do both know what this means. I think thankfully to a lot of TV shows that maybe do use this, but potentially down the line, who knows, that there could be the case that this becomes a new norm. Let's hope not, because I think it's a fun thing. But in terms of picking up the phone, I think there's an easy way of every generation picking on, as I said earlier, that, this generation, they can't pick up the phone, they only send memes. I don't think that's entirely true, or at least I don't think it's true for the entire generation. And I don't think it's to pick on one generation. Gen Z, maybe one can't, maybe one can. I think let's look at my dad or a couple family friends. They might not enjoy picking up the phone. It could be an intimidating task for a lot of people. I think I got quite lucky picking up the phone for you for many years, so it got quite normalized. But for sure, I don't think this is a Gen Z thing. I think this is a potentially just a new world thing as technology evolves and the things like voicemail come. So there's a more of a way out for it, and it becomes normalized.
I think you're right. And what they're saying is that you pick up the phone and there's silence. And I have to say, from my point of view, having spent a lot of time with your friends, that's not true at all. So myth bust one, they can pick up the phone and they can say hello.
Well, I think on one hand, people like to say we're silent at the beginning, and then they'll say we're serial yappers on the other end. I think if anything, my generation can talk for England at most of them, talk for England for most of the time. So, yeah, I think we're okay on that front.
And so, if somebody called you right now,
Yeah.
would you answer it or let it go to voicemail?
Well, currently on the podcast, probably not, but absolutely, I would always answer it. Yeah.
So funny. It's interesting because the next generation are the alphas. So let's see what you will make of the alphas.
Absolutely.
Okay, my next one. It's said that Generation Z would rather become TikTok famous than work a 9 to 5. Are you all allergic to work?
I think who doesn't want to become instantly rich and famous? Well, actually, that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of people who don't want to become famous instantly, me being one of them. But I think the generation, our generation especially, grew up with the massive boom in YouTube specifically, and looking at characters like the Sidemen and KSI and Mr. Beast, who created such a career for themselves doing videos that we all observe to be really fun. Of course, there's a huge amount of work that goes behind all of that that maybe we didn't understand or appreciate when we were younger.
Sure.
And there's an element of you do so many videos and you hope that one of them gets picked up. We had this conversation so much when I was young. I used to play football and upload YouTube's uh, with my friends
All the time.
all the time, which are good fun to look back on. But you always used to say to me, because I think I used to be unaware of how hard it actually was. And you see the 10, you see the 20 who have really made it successful, but you don't see there are probably millions now who have attempted to do something on YouTube or, create that life for themselves that don't. I think TikTok has changed the game on that a little bit because the ability to grow your platform fast has happened
True.
in the last 5 years probably and created a big boom. But for sure, I think look, most people are now aware, especially as you go into your early 20s and maybe maybe even your A levels, post GCSE kind of time, you realize that the 9 to 5, and not even the 9 to 5, but a working life is what you have to do, and you realize that's the lifestyle you've got to kind of make a decision on. So yeah, I don't think as a generation we're adverse to having a 9 to 5, but I think the great thing is there's more opportunities now to explore different paths. You're not stuck on one place.
So, myth bust two, you're not allergic to
Yeah,
hard work. It's
if
good to
only.
know. And a question then, do you think that ambition looks different today than it did, say, for my generation?
I don't think I could necessarily comment on that because I don't know what the ambition looked like. Maybe for you, I think it's different in terms of the pathways are slightly different and the world is changing. Technology has changed so much, but I think we all have huge ambition. I can never speak for the entire generation. I'm sure there's people who look at me and think, we're completely unaligned, and that's probably the case across every generation. But I would say I have huge ambition, and the people around me do as well. I just think potentially the pathways are slightly different because the world is changing.
I think you're right. And I certainly haven't seen any lack of ambition in your peer group.
Mm.
They all seem very, very ambitious and keen to do well. So we'll continue to myth bust for Generation Z.
Good, good.
So some people joke that your generation expects to be the CEO before you've even made a cup of tea in the
Mm.
office. Is Gen Z just impatient for success?
Uh, we've had a good laugh about this one all week because do you know? I think it is true to a certain extent. Who doesn't want to skip the grinder kind of job
The
and
photocopying.
yeah, and go straight up to the top? I mean, I think that's everybody's dream to a certain extent, or at least not to be the photocopying or the coffee running person instantly. And I think we might joke about it, but I do think people understand that isn't often a reality. Maybe to a select few, but it's definitely not the case for the mass majority of people. So, of course, I'd love to rise super fast. I'm sure my friends would as well. But going through university, it hits home that you've got some hard work to graft through first.
Some debt too.
Significant, yeah.
Do you think that, in fact, the older generations, they've forgotten that they wanted to do things quickly too? Do you think that's a case in point for this?
I'm sure that is the case. I think it's all relative to a certain extent. The way that our generation has grown up through this kind of instant lifestyle with
Mm.
with the rise of Snapchat, YouTube, TikTok, that everything you can get any knowledge or information that you desire pretty much instantly. And now with OpenAI and ChatGPT, it's even more the case. The stuff that you'd have to maybe study for 3 days can be done in 3 minutes. So so things are different, but I think that's an evolution rather than a change necessarily. I just think it's relative to the generations. So perhaps I think as we all get older, we forget what we were like. I even do it with Georgia at times, my younger sister. I think, you know, when I comment on things, I look back and go, do you know what? Probably should be more flexible with that because I would have done the exactly same thing. So I think we all like to forget and glamorize what we were like when we were younger. But yeah.
Okay, so you've talked about ChatGPT,
Mm,
OpenAI, AI in general. A lot of entry level jobs and internships, in fact, the very roles that young people rely upon to gain experience are starting to be automated
mm,
and reshaped by AI. And as we know, this technology is changing almost as we look at it.
mhm.
If you look at how much AI has become a part of all of our lives and many people we know, do you think, or does this worry you? And do you think that Generation Z and the following generations are losing the opportunity to get your foot in the door at that entry level job? And but then on the other hand, are you better placed to be more adaptable and flexible? What's your thoughts around that?
I think that's an interesting point you raise at the end of it, because I think you see a lot the narrative push that it's really hard to get into jobs at the beginning because AI is taking over. And there's definitely elements of that. And I don't want to come and make excuses on that front, because I think it's easy to throw things like AI as that's why I can't get the job. But also, we have to understand, and I'm going to my fourth year of university. It's massively enhanced how quickly we can do things at uni. And I would think, if you look at grades across essays, they have probably raised relative to the marking, right? I think because there's so much research you can do very quickly, you can be getting your grades checked constantly by AI and improving and getting better English. There's no doubt it's enhanced. Whether that's enhanced our academics, because it's not necessarily us doing it all the time, I don't know. I don't know if that preps us better for the workforce. I think we'll see that in 5, 10 years time, just like COVID has with people sitting their GCSEs now. It's the knock on effect of all of this stuff, and as AI is so new, we'll see the repercussions. But in terms of entering the workforce, I think it can be a scary prospect. I don't think it's just for people my age. You look at the manufacturing sector in Norwich, I think it was the other day, or somewhere else, in Norfolk it was, that there's just more jobs that have been lost. And that's the evolution of the game, especially if you go back to my generation who are entering maybe PSF firms, like accounting firms, consulting firms, the beginner jobs. You can absolutely understand why these corporates are choosing Salesforce. I think I heard the CFO or CEO talk about how 30 to 40% of their workforce is now AI. So of course it has a massive knock-on effect, but we have to, we can't sit there and moan about it. We have to find ways to leverage it and use it in the best way possible. Otherwise we're all going to be left behind. So yes, it's scary, but I think we are learning and getting the benefits of it as well. So there's both ways to this argument.
I think it's absolutely right. And it's potentially at the moment a little bit like the Wild West. It's such a new developing, we haven't
100%.
quite got our reins on it yet. And maybe we never will. But for sure, the only way to look at this for your generation and mine is to embrace it
Mm.
and work with it and see the benefits rather than always think about the negatives. But I think this is the challenging time for young people, not only because economically much of the world is suffering,
Yeah.
and AI has come in and definitely impacted some of those entry level jobs.
Yeah.
But I think I see positivity and youthfulness and happiness in your generation. And I don't think you're encumbered by many of the myths that are out
Yeah,
there.
for sure.
But no doubt, this is a challenging time for young people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's economically and humanitarianly, the world is in an interesting place right now, and I don't think that's just our generation. There seems to be something across all generations. You look at my grandfather and your dad, what they had to go through when they were 20. I'm sure that's an incredibly unique challenge that we can't. Despite the fact there's a lot going on in our world, it's evolved to the point that we don't have to worry about that in the same way that they had to worry about that. You grew up so much through the IRA, and I'm sure that was absolutely terrifying at points. And now we grew up with a lot of oppression across the world, which is really tough. And that absolutely affects economics and it affects culture. It's really tough. So I think every generation battles with it. I don't think it's something necessarily new. I just think it's a change, and we have to find a way through it. And I think as humans, we always do, despite how much we might bicker with each other at times. There's always a way through it. So we'll keep learning, and for sure there's unique challenges, but that's the point of being humans, right?
I think you're absolutely right. And as my father, your grandfather would have said, tomorrow will be a good day. And
Absolutely.
we always must remember that because he believed it.
100%. You have to get up with a renewed sense of purpose every day. I think that's what kept him going every day. And something I learned from him so much was the sun's going to move up and down every single day. So you've kind of got to get up and move. And I know that's a lot easier said than done, but for all generations and ours specifically, we're going to have to keep moving.
And so another little bit of criticism
Yeah,
for Generation
let's
Z.
go. I'm ready.
and it does make me laugh
Mm.
out loud. I don't know why it makes me laugh so much. So this bit of criticism says that um, it says of you that if anyone criticizes Generation Z, you all go immediately into a meltdown
Mm.
and need a safe space. And and really are wounded if someone says that your work isn't perfect. Um, what's your comeback on that?
I think it's interesting because I think our generation gets accused a lot of being soft, and I'm sure there's probably a lot of good reason for that argument. Again, I can't speak for everybody, and I can only speak for my peers and for myself in reality. That I don't personally feel like that with criticism. I think it's the way to make you better. But of course, if somebody attacks you with no real feedback, it can be really frustrating. And maybe with the increase of pastoral care that even I've seen through my school years, I look at how I was through kind of my prep school and relative to how Georgia was. The increase in pastoral care is huge. There's a lot more arms wrapped around you than maybe there was even 10, 20, 30 years ago. So
N- None
that's
in
going
my
to
life.
raise, yeah, that's going to raise maybe the soft thing. I think soft is a little bit harsh, but definitely there's a change. Um, Criticism is always tough for anybody, and I think if anybody says they don't find it difficult, they're lying. And I think that's across every generation, especially if there's not a good purpose behind it. I think that's one of the key things. If you get criticized in your work or at university or just in life, but they give a good reason or they offer you a solution to make that better, you can deal with that very well. If somebody just attacks you when you don't feel like you've done something wrong, whether that be work, whether that be in public, that's a lot harder to swallow because you don't know how to respond. So perhaps that is a new thing for our generation. I'm not a massive believer that that's not been the case over the years. I just think with the case of social media and how instant things are, it's maybe become more prevalent that you can see how people feel about it because all the reactions go up online instantly. Everything's made very public. So who knows? Again, I can't judge across generations, but for sure, I think a lot of us struggle with criticism at times.
I think it's a really good observation. And I think throughout my working life, um, critique was open and given.
Mm.
And and there's definitely a way to give criticism. I would say that it wouldn't even be criticism, it would be helping someone to develop in their job role,
Feedback, right? Yeah,
feedback. And if it's given in the right way, it can be received in the right
mm,
way. And it's definitely a two-way process.
for sure.
But maybe this is not about Gen Z not being able to take criticism. Maybe this is just the development of us all working together in a different way. So things are said differently. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I do too.
So, okay, we've myth busted that as well.
No, I hope so.
Um, okay, so here's a little bit of cancel culture that
Oh,
is going to be thrown
nice
your
hot
way.
topic consistently.
So, every time someone sneezes the wrong way, Gen Z is accused of cancelling them.
Yeah.
Do you really want to cancel everything?
Again, I feel a duty to say this isn't just Gen Z. I think the rise of social media has caused this hugely. Um, I don't think it's necessarily a new reaction. I just think it's newly accessible. If somebody doesn't like someone, you can very, very quickly make it seem like it's true when it's not. So, people can insinuate something on TikTok and it can absolutely ruin someone. It's been seen across the board. It's not you. And I think maybe we've got a little bit power hungry with it. That to a point, you have the power to do it and put something up online, especially if you've got some following. It's not
Mm,
complicated to do so. Whereas maybe 30 years ago, people would have loved to do it still. There's always rivalries, there's always things you'd like to say about someone, but there wasn't an avenue to actually put that out there and reach as many people. With the way TikTok and Instagram is now, you can reach such a large number of people on this front comparably that I think cancel culture has increased. And maybe there's a bit more divisiveness on that front purely because there's so many views now accessible to everybody and people don't like being disagreed with. That's just natural. We don't like being disagreed with. And comments can get quite toxic. We all know how it is on X and TikTok. It can be amazing at times. And don't get me wrong, some of the support for creators we have out there is unbelievable. And as much as you can ruin someone's life, you can always also change someone's life so much for the better.
mm.
So there's two sides of it. Yes, cancel culture exists. I don't think it's new. I just think it's newly accessible. But it'd be interesting to know your take on it because growing up maybe without that instant access to pushing that out there, I don't know if people in your generation did feel like they wanted to cancel people but just didn't have the avenue to do it.
I think it's a good throwback because I don't know that it ever occurred to us,
That's what I don't
because
think.
there simply wasn't. Remember, if you wanted to say anything, you probably had to say it in a newspaper column, in an article
Mm,
or in the I don't even remember what they're called, but you could put something in the back of the newspaper.
mm,
So I don't think that it wasn't a thing,
mm.
because you couldn't.
Yeah,
But I also think, as we know, we have had both sides of the coin of
absolutely.
the incredible throw of, let's not call it just social media, the impact of media
Media,
globally,
sure.
and both in a positive and a very negative way. But I think this is just the difference, perhaps, between holding people accountable and cancelling them. And I think in today's world, it can very quickly, toxically get to cancelling rather than just saying,
It can spiral,
yeah,
for
it
sure.
can. And so I think in this case, it's, uh, it's maybe an overindulged myth, but it's definitely out there.
Yeah.
Um, so another one. So I keep reading that Gen Z spends all their money on iced coffee,
Yeah.
oat milk lattes, and training, running shoes they don't need. And I just have to give you an anecdote. I was in somebody's office the other day and they showed me their fridge and they said they opened the door
Mm,
and they had 15 types of milk. And they said, you can guess which generation lives here.
mm.
And so I'm thinking this isn't just a myth. Is the spending all the money on iced coffees and oat milk lattes,
Yeah.
is this all of your idea of financial planning?
Uh, Financial planning, no, but I think it is a massively true thing. Unfortunately, I think I'm victim to this myself as well with the new running shoes and coffee as well. I think,
A £4
unfo
coffee?
yeah, unfortunately, well, we went to a cafe today in Battersea, and that was £4 per coffee. You know, you spend 2 coffees, £8.
It was
I mean, we
delicious
it was
coffee,
great
just
coffee,
just
but
putting it out
for
there, but
£4. You
£4.
know, absolutely. I've heard in New York from a lot of friends that they're paying £7 and £8 for dollars for a coffee, and you just think, crikey, no wonder. So maybe we're not all buying more coffees. I think perhaps just the economics of it have increased hugely. But who doesn't want a coffee? You know, I think we every time we're out, we probably buy one that we shouldn't buy. But it's maybe not an addiction, but it's such a habitual thing to do. But I think potentially we're quite materialistic as a generation. Not everyone. And again, I need to clarify that I cannot speak for everybody, and it's definitely not fair.
Sure.
I don't, I don't think I'm particularly materialistic in a lot of ways, but there are always things that you favor buying, and I know there's a massive kick in running at the moment. The running and cafe culture is huge. You do a run with somebody, you go for a pastry and a coffee. So of course, from my point of view, if you look to my bank, I think it'd be quite shameful if you could equate how much has gone on coffee in the last 3 years with university and running specifically. But I'm not afraid of that. I think you make trade offs all the time and you choose what you're going to spend your money on. I'm sure if we look back 30 years ago, I mean, even when I was younger, right, the trade off was match attacks. I have books of Topps match attacks and maybe some Mars milks back then, and it's just shifted. So I think every generation probably had their thing. When you grew up, you probably took money to the local sweet shop or the local newspaper shop. It, I think it's probably blown up, and unfortunately, just cost of living over the years, the new valuation of everything, it's become more prevalent that when you buy a coffee, you kind of wince every time. Whereas maybe 10, 30 years ago, it wouldn't have felt like that. But again, it's all relative. So unfortunately, I can't myth bust on that one. I'm
Hmm.
just going to defend it.
Okay, so iced lattes do drain your bank account,
Yeah,
and that's okay though.
it is.
Me, I'm a drink your coffee at home as much as you can,
Mhm.
but who doesn't like a lovely coffee in a cafe?
Yeah,
And when you're walking through London, and so moving on, I think that if you think about every generation, take it. Let's go back to your grandfather's generation,
yeah,
the silent generation. They all gathered around the radio.
yeah,
The boomers saw TV change and become part of the family home. The X's, me, we went from landlines to PCs.
yeah,
In my growing up years, I had one of the first Nintendos. It was like magic. It
yeah,
was just like magic. And then millennials,
yeah.
and they went from dial up, of which you and your sister have no knowledge.
No.
The beep, 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 and waiting for the connection. They went from dial up to smartphones.
Mm.
And now for you, Generation Z, encountering AI at the very start of your career. You have technology at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And again, thinking about Granddad, by the time he was 100, he had an iPhone and an iPad. So this isn't about generations not being able to adopt the technology,
No.
but for your generation, this is immersion.
Yeah.
A wave of technology that changes the way you work and the way you live. And do you think that this causes a risk for young people, um, making those first steps into adulthood harder?
It's an interesting point, I think, and the evolution of technology is so apparent that you can't really run away from it. I think there'll be people my age who remember their first phone. So even look at the shift through my lifestyle, my lifetime. My first phone that I really remember was a Firefly. Had mum, dad, and 999. And you then look to 5 years later for Georgia, her first phone was an iPhone. Maybe one of the really early ones, and maybe very secondhand, but nonetheless, that was the lifestyle. And I think that's an evolution of technology. I think
Sure.
we're going to have to be very careful of it as next generation parents, the people who are just going into that next chapter of their life now, for me in years to come, and then for Georgia and for the next generation. How do you raise the generation after you to not be completely reliant on it? Because there's absolutely no doubt that if you use your iPad as a distraction for your kids, you don't bother taking them out as much. That I don't want to say it's going to stunt their growth because I have no idea. I'm not someone who studied in this, but I would really hope that we don't lose the outside culture, stepping away from it. I'm really conscious of going with my friends sometimes. We drove up to the Lake District, didn't we? And we were very much off our phones for that period of time. And it was probably one of the best. We felt cleansed to a certain extent,
Liberated.
very liberated
Yeah.
for those 3 days. And I think we have to be very conscious of that because it's so easy to use technology as a complete distraction growing up. And it's brilliant. Don't get me wrong. It's absolutely something we have to. It goes back to our earlier point, doesn't it? We have to learn how to use it in the right way, and we have the control over that in the moment. So let's not lose sight of it. But for sure, we have to be a little bit careful of it.
And I think that we as a family have wrestled would be too strong a word,
Mhm.
but had to find our way and
Yeah,
find our place with the technology that we love,
yeah,
but that doesn't become that the technology is leading us. For example, when we eat together, we have a no phone rule, and sometimes it's hard for people to let go of the
yeah,
latest score
yeah.
of the sport, or the
I will
thing
do
that they
that.
need to know. But
Yeah,
actually, we've been pretty robust at that.
yeah.
And that will set the foundations for you and your
Hmm.
sister to manage that as
Yeah.
you get older. And so I think an- another thing that you're, let's say, accused of would be hard, but look, it's what they're saying is you're the Amazon Prime generation. You buy it, you wear it once, and then you send it back. Is is this true?
Whoa, from speaking to evidence pre this podcast, I think we had the conversation that you said you buy 10 things and send 9 back. So I'm not sure we can levy this against my generation entirely. I think there is an aspect of we expect everything to come quickly and it's easier to return. Again, evolution of the times. I wouldn't say I'm like that. I'm absolutely resistant to doing returns just because it seems quite annoying. But that might be a male v female thing, to be
I think you
totally
just can't be
honest.
bothered.
Sounds like a lot of admin. Um, but for sure, with Amazon Prime being such a big thing, and the rise of eBay, Amazon Prime, Vinted, things that can come really quickly, be super accessible. For sure, it's changed things, and you probably place less value on things that you buy. If you, there's no doubt, if you wait a month for something to ship over, you're probably going to take more care about making sure that's the right thing in the pre-purchase and post. Whereas now you feel less responsible when buying something because it's going to be £9. You might have free Prime delivery, or even you pay a little bit for very quick delivery. You feel less responsible to actually take good care of that. That's probably not a good thing. I don't know, but great that we can get stuff so quickly and make decisions like that. We have a lot more flexibility. So again, I don't think that's a Gen Z thing,
No, okay.
Gen Z thing. Sorry, can't be American. Um, but I don't think that's a Gen Z thing. I think that happens. That's more of an adoption to all of us now that we have that flexibility.
I think it's true, and I think we've been early adopters of all of the tech,
Mm.
and and for the most part, absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I think one of the sad things is, for example, I've had to recently try and have a couple of bags repaired
Yeah.
and gone to the trouble to send this really, I love this bag,
I
sent it
know.
back to Germany,
Yeah.
and it's a zip. And they've said it's not worth it. I want them to make it worth it, but they would rather discount a new bag and sell a new bag to me. And so this is the downside of this evolution,
Yeah.
that it's not worth it to them to
For sure.
change that zip. They'd rather sell me a new one. But I think let's not hover around the negative. Let's keep around the positive, that having all of these things at our fingertips is fantastic. But the next point is something that I don't feel really positive about this. And I
Mhm.
think this could be something that Gen Z might have to hold their hands up at.
'Kay.
Um, so it is said that Gen Z can't go out to dinner without posting their food online.
Mhm.
And that privacy doesn't exist because you overshare everything. Is that real?
I think it's difficult, again, to speak for the entire generation. I would like to think I'm not particularly like that. I'm not really someone who's always felt the need to post everything across social media, but there's definitely an element of it, especially when you're a bit younger. I think as you get to 20s, maybe it slightly fades out. I don't think it is totally Gen Z thing. Look at Facebook, and I bet you'll see a lot of people post their kids or their meals every day, 3 times a day. And again, I think that's the rise of social media. But for sure, privacy has taken a hit through a lot of these things. I think Snapchat was a massive breaker in this because it was so much
True.
more personal, because you can do snaps every day, every couple of minutes to your life. So people often feel like they are really close friends without ever even meeting. So there's definitely an element of privacy that's just taken a hit. I would imagine. Again, I can't speak for older generations, but the whole taking photos of everything, I think it's evident on social media. It's clear. It's not something that someone can rebuff. I think it's a big millennial thing. I think it's a big Gen Z thing, and it will be a big alpha thing. I mean, even we look at people your age. We look at your friends. They post a lot of things. Dad does it as well. I think it's a rise through social media, but for sure we can hold our hands up and say that's definitely something that's probably changed over the last 20 years.
So do you think your generation can eat dinner without filming it?
Yes, I would hope so. As long as you have I think there's standards in place, and I would hope so. With my girlfriend or with you guys, it's always gonna be like that. I mean, we do fall victim to taking photos of food a lot. I mean, I do have a couple of home cooked meal on my phone saver right now, but we'll ignore that for a moment. Uh, Definitely pre-meals, you'll see a lot of pictures taken. So yeah, I think we can't shake that one away. That's definitely something that's true.
Okay, so if I should have buzzers, shouldn't I? Like a
Yeah,
true and false.
true or false?
Yeah. And so if it's not on TikTok, did it ever happen?
I would hope that it's yes and no for that. You know, if it is on TikTok, I hope we can not always say that it did happen. Um, I think sad reality is if it is on TikTok, it has happened. If it's not on TikTok, it might not have happened
Mhm.
unless there's a lot of other evidence to show that it has.
I think it's true.
So yeah, quite possibly the case.
So if TikTok disappeared tomorrow, because we're often threatened that it
World
might,
meltdown.
yeah, would
World
Generation
meltdown.
Z survive?
Gosh, who knows now? I mean, look at America. It went into absolute meltdown when they said TikTok was going. They found the new Chinese app. So I think there's always going to be ways around that, and it probably can't die because it's so powerful now. Same with ChatGPT. I think if you said to the world now, okay, banned, I think people would find a way to resist, and
Me,
it's
I
not
would.
new, right? It's the same with alcohol in America back then with prohibition. You found different ways of doing it with moonshine. So I don't think it's necessarily a new thing. People like what they create, and if we all adopt it, we don't want to lose it.
No, I think people can be very ingenious with the speakeasies
Hmm.
and the ways to get around all sorts of things.
For sure. I mean, even look at the new Online Safety Act, right? People use VPNs. This is not a myth. This is not
It's true.
a hidden fact. Everybody knows this.
Yes.
So all of these things you can ban as much as you want, and you can say TikTok's going to go, people are going to find ways around it. So I think we'll always survive because people are very smart and they'll find ways around things they want to keep.
I think it's true. And now this is an interesting one. It is said that Generation Z care more about pronouns and politics
Mm.
than practical things like paying bills. How do you respond to that?
Uh, I think this is a massively media-led narrative. I would hope I can only speak for my friends, and maybe that's a very skewed point of view,
I'd like to know what they all think
and
about it.
always there's massively diverging views across, and we have to embrace those. There are so many views, and that's a brilliant thing for our
It's a great
society.
thing.
I have nothing against that. From my point of view, I don't care, and I think that's the case for a lot of my friends. Block out the noise for most of the part. You can be who you want to be. To me, it doesn't interest me in my daily life. I'm still going to focus on getting my job and getting paying the bills and doing the things that are necessary to move through life. And that might not be the same view as somebody else holds. And honestly, I'm not worried about that. That's okay. We're completely allowed to have different views. My issue comes, and I think the issue comes with a lot of people, is when a view is pushed on you or enforced on you or made to make you feel wrong. Like, and I think that's definitely something that's happening. For sure, maybe a problem that we have to face as a generation going forward is how to adopt all of these views, because it's so much easier to see them now, where before
Mhm.
you may have no idea what somebody else is thinking. Social media has allowed so many views to come forward, and that's great in some ways, and it can be dangerous in other ways. So we have to learn, not just as Generation Z, but alphas, millennials, how do we cope with all these views and make sure that it's safe for everybody, but also making sure we do just get on with life, because otherwise we're going to fall behind, and things aren't going to go the way we want to.
Very astute, I think, and, for me, and I can honestly say almost everyone I know that I can think of, we just want everyone to be the best version of themselves. It
Absolutely.
doesn't matter who you are.
And I
Be
accept
yourself.
that's an easy point of view from people who generically have had the same viewpoints across a lot of
It's true.
generations. We've not felt like we've struggled with that, so we can never speak on behalf of different viewpoints, different races. I think it's a very privileged position to be in, and I think a lot of people are not observant of that. So we have to be very careful, and we have to make sure that we appreciate those different things and different angles, and we're always going to have different opinions.
Mm.
We just have to learn how to deal with it best and include all of those in a safe way, which also means that we can keep going on as generations to come.
I think it's also very astute, and I think it's right that we are in some ways forced to look
Mm,
at those people who didn't have a voice, who didn't ever feel they were listened to or heard or
mhm.
seen, and that they are seen.
And that's an
And
amazing thing.
it's an
That is an amazing
amazing
thing.
thing. And we, in my view, just have to let it go its course. It's going to find its balance.
It has to,
And
yeah.
it's always going to be a bit bumpy at the beginning. But I think it's a terrific thing. And so would you say, talking about the workplace, talking about life in
Mm.
general, that Generation Z is more anxious, or are you just more open to talking about anxiety?
I think in so many good ways, we have got better at speaking of things. You look at I'll speak from my point of view. You look at platforms like Movember, that was
Mhm.
huge for me going through my school system. Every year, Movember was, it was effectively cultural for all of the boys that I knew going through Bedford. They would all say the same thing, and it has definitely given a platform. You look at people like Paddy Pimblett in the UFC, who after his fight will talk hugely about men's mental health. So that there's definitely becoming a movement towards it. We have a long way to go to talk about mental health and anxiety in the correct way, because there's a lot of cases where, in my opinion, it's not used in the correct way. And we have to make sure that we find that balance, because I know a lot of people. I've had a friend who's taken his life, and I know a lot of other people who have had similar circumstances. And I know this is going away from anxiety to a certain extent, but I think it's a really important thing that we are getting better at talking about it. We're getting better at women speaking up against people who have been really poor and inappropriate. We're getting better at men talking about their feelings. We have such a long way to go, but I'm really glad and I'm really proud of my generation for being able to push that forward. We're getting better. We're doing charity events. We're not afraid to speak out about it. We're It's not embarrassing anymore. And you need people like the Paddy Pimblets in the UFC to talk about it. You need the influencers, you need the people who have the power over the generations to say, look, it is absolutely okay. And we might never shake that. There might always be a little bit of anxiety about speaking how we feel. But if you see other people doing it, it's only going to get better. And that's a massive beneficial thing of social media, that we've created a platform where we can speak about anxiety that perhaps we couldn't have before. So I'm very proud just speaking from a men's mental health point of view, that we're improving, and I hope we keep improving.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that, however Generation Z might be criticised for, um well, the previous generation, millennials, were accused of being snowflakes,
Mm,
flaky, and, I'm not sure why we keep saying this about the generations because, um, I have not seen any of your generation, be, flaky or not being able to cope with their anxiety. In fact, of your friendship groups, both, male and female, both have been open, and I think this is something to be celebrated,
mm,
that we take, anxiety, and other issues from being under the table to being on
yeah,
the table. I think what people are conflicted by is that previous generations would have said, "Buck up, get on with it." And there's a little bit of that,
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely,
There's a little bit of that. Let's get some resilience out there.
for sure,
And some days it's just not a nice day. Some days
absolutely,
we're just not happy. Some days there are awful things that happen, but they'll get better.
yeah,
But what we mustn't confuse that with is, over here, the deeper anxieties that lead to mental health.
absolutely.
What your generation is doing is
Mhm.
firmly putting them on the table, and we must never go back.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing because there was definitely a period of time looking at the magazines and social media and I think there's a massive warped perception. And I'm speaking specifically about probably the life that I look at a lot, which is the gym culture, the how do you look culture. It's become very vain with dating apps, with the instant access to very fit people online constantly. That it can get really tough for a lot of people. I
Yeah.
completely can see that you don't look like that and you find it very hard, and there's so much misinformation out there. We're for sure we've had to fight that a little bit, and I think we are. I think we're getting a lot better at it because there are good people standing up and fighting against it, and people who are reasonable. And if you present good, reasonable arguments to people, they're going to be on board with it. So we are getting better at it. We fought against maybe a wave of stereotypes and unachievable things that have been pushed in magazines, and I think that's great for a generation that Georgia's in. Whether she's in mine or in Alpha, I'm not
It's in
quite sure.
yours.
She's in mine, right? So that's great for her that I'm sure they are dealing with it. They'll look at social media and go, "Crikey, like why am I not like that?" And that's such a shame. But I hope we keep fighting against it. We're getting better at it. So let's see. We're going to keep working on it.
I think it's a really good point because, as a parent raising children in a world where, perfection is seen everywhere,
Mm,
and what you know as a parent is there's no such thing
yeah,
as perfection. But how do you ensure that your children are resilient enough to see that perfection is not the goal,
yeah,
that be the best you can be of yourself. And I think that's really tough for young people,
mhm,
especially if they don't have guides to take
yeah,
them through and and the support to help you through
mhm,
looking at all of these amazing images of perfection. And that can be food, it can be how you look, it's your hair, it's your makeup,
mm,
it's your muscles, it's the places you go and the things that you do.
mhm,
Is this is all how it should be,
mhm,
and life's not really like that, but it's a tough thing to see. I really accept that. And I don't think, by the way, that only affects Generation Z.
absolutely not. Yeah,
I think it can affect all the generations.
100%.
And so thinking about your peer group
Mhm.
specifically, what do you think are your biggest worries?
I think that's an interesting question. I'm trying to think about it from even my perspective at the moment. I think what we can achieve is a big thing because we're so young. We all want to race to the top instantly, and there comes a point about this age. I speak to my friends a lot about it, where you go to a good university, you've got the degree, and then you suddenly go, "Crikey,
And now what?
what now?" So I think that's a big concern. You probably think you're going to walk into something, and you've been told all your life that this is the pathway, right? You need to go and get good grades at school, good university degree, and then you're through. Now you've got to add in internships. You need to volunteer. There's a lot of these things that are now adding up because there's such an influx of students. So certainly that's probably a concern. That am I going to match the ambition? And we worked hard, so are we going to match it? But that can't be an excuse as well. We have to absolutely understand that just because we want something, we think we deserve it. It's absolutely not the case that we will get it. So that for sure, I think AI is a concern as we touched on earlier, but again, we've kind of got past that. Finding good relationships, I'm
Mm.
sure is a concern. I've got very lucky recently, but I know for a lot of people it's hard. That there's a different culture around dating and relationships where maybe you would have been more confident to go up to someone 10, 20 years ago because there wasn't social media. And now dating apps have been a huge aspect in all of that. Instant vein in certain circumstances that might not be a universal view.
Swiping right.
Yeah, I have fun views on that with a couple of my friends anyway. That I'm not a massive lover of them, and I think they peddle a certain narrative. But look, for a lot of people, they've worked.
Mhm.
So I think relationships can be a concern because we've maybe lost a bit of the bravery that granddad would have had, dad would have had. So there's that element of that we maybe can't have the same human interaction. Well, no, we can. Maybe we don't think we can have the same human interactions that happened a long time ago. So I would look at that. You've got to look at all the concerns are going to come for the future. So career and personal life, those are the two angles.
Mm.
Those are the two concerns. I think for every generation, there'll be different challenges that face
Sure.
each of us. So no doubt we'll have concerns, and those are universal across generations.
I think that's, again, very astute. And in my youth, we had something called the telephone cafe. I'd like to know what you would think of, your generation would think of this. So you'd go into the cafe,
Mm.
and on each table there was a telephone, and there was a number above each table. And if you fancied someone on another table, you phoned them up. And on the
Sounds
basis
great.
that we've already had a challenge because it was one of those phones,
Yeah.
how would you all feel about that?
Sounds quite good fun, to be honest. But
Especially after
exactly
a
is
few
that
beers.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, especially after a couple of pints. But I think that's exactly it, right? Every generation finds new ways for dating because
Sure.
we seem to have an aversion to actually having a conversation at times. So there's always ways to make it more instant and easier. Yeah, that sounds good fun, and I don't think it's that dissimilar to now because the only difference is we're not in a cafe, you're just looking at a photo and then you give a call or a message.
I know.
So it's an evolution, right? It's
It
gonna
is.
change. It used to be letters, you used to fancy someone in the street and you would send them a letter. It's probably
Mhm.
what granddad did, I would imagine.
Oh, he just made sure he kept going back to the same shop.
Exactly, we might get a bit more trouble for that these days.
Yes,
Uh,
it's true.
Change of times, but for sure, I think letters to telephone to
Mhm.
apps,
To apps.
it's a change and yeah, that could be a
It's
concern.
instant access, isn't it, for everything these days? You have to find your way with it. I'm curious also about how your generation watches its media, and I'm not talking about news. I'm talking about films, TVs, where and how. Because I think there's a lot of generations don't understand what I think is a massive change.
Mm.
Um, because my view is that your generation doesn't watch TV. Tell
Uh,
us about that.
I think that's definitely true. I think there's a massive shift from what you probably grew up doing, which was a lot of TV, a lot of
3 channels.
mainstream channels, right? Whereas now we have so much information available, you have so much flexibility in what you want to pick. Streaming has made a massive change in that. The access of Netflix, Amazon, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, you could go on and on, right? Of
Mhm,
how many things
mhm.
you've got. Apps of every mainstream channel. You've got people then commenting on those apps and those news articles. So you have about 10 different views per article. So no wonder TV is becoming perhaps a little bit more redundant. For sure, it's still a useful outlet. But when I think about how I gather news, if when I'm not living with you guys, I will not watch the news on TV. Just won't do
Okay.
it because I won't turn on the news channels. I just don't have an interest in it. So, and
Because
I
you
think
get
that's
your
what,
news another way.
yeah, I'll get it on Instagram. I'll get it on reading articles. I think thankfully I made sure that I read a lot. There's definitely a lot of people who do still read a lot, and I'm
Mhm.
glad that's the case on apps. But I think people are a little bit bored of the narratives. People don't want the opinion at times. They want to formulate their own opinions,
I think it's right.
so they read their own outlets. So it's definitely a shift away from TV. I'm sure there's demographics to prove it, and I'd be very happy to be proven wrong as well.
I don't think
But
you would be.
I think if you look statistically, there is definitely from Generation Z, and it will get even more prevalent with. I mean,
Yeah.
when does Georgia ever watch the news?
No.
She will not watch it.
And this is
So
not really just about the news. This is even just the way that you watch your TV.
it's
And
just
I think that's changed in our house. We essentially have a monitor.
mm,
And on that monitor, we don't really watch much live TV. The only really live TV that we watch will be some news.
yeah,
Other than that, everything in our life is streamed.
yeah, absolutely
And that's a massive change in our life.
huge.
For you and your generation, you would never make any use of the terrestrial channels
No, never,
ever.
never.
So this is going to fundamentally change when we look at the mainstream media outlets, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel
Mm.
5. They cannot continue to exist the way they do
They
today.
have to evolve, and they definitely know that, and they're trying.
But they're
Let's
not
see.
attracting you and your friends.
No,
Nope, they aren't.
I don't think they
And
are.
this is just a if all of you are watching, the mainstream media channels are watching, I really hope you're thinking about this, because these
Sure.
next generations are not watching you.
Well,
They're getting their news and their media and their films and their all of the information somewhere else.
and there's a massive drive to independent creators. I can pick two examples off the top of my head. Let's look at football for a second. Someone like Mark Goldbridge,
Yeah, who's
who's
amazing.
done incredibly in this,
Yeah,
and he might divide opinions, but for a lot of people, he's brilliant.
he's
I
fine.
love watching him, and he's just got broadcasting rights for the German football league, and a
Good
lot
for
of the
him.
mainstream media have been pushing the narrative that they're the mainstream media. That's how people take the news. But he's proving that's not the case. Take Dylan Page on TikTok, who is an independent guy who pulls the news from lots of different outlets and then gives it out there. He's got multi-millions of followers on TikTok, and I bet he gets more views than a lot of the mainstream media as well. So for sure, there's just a different method, and there's a
Mm.
drive to people wanting to hear from real human people, not in a super set up studio way. They want to hear it from couch to couch.
Yes,
So there's
more like
definitely
this.
more personable, absolutely. So
I
there's a
think
change.
that change is happening. I'd say that in our household, we're early adopters
Mm,
anyway. And I know that we don't watch mainstream media in a live way. Everything we do, pretty much 98% of what we watch is streamed.
yeah,
And so if we're doing it,
you
that
would imagine.
everybody will, all the generations to come will never be watching media in the same way.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, really, when you think about, if you take Grandad's 100 years, they just got radio.
Hmm.
And then by the time that my mother was growing up, TV was being adopted into homes.
Yeah.
I remember we got our first color TV. It had 3 channels.
Yeah.
And look, in what's a very short space of time, we're not actually watching it like that anymore. We're watching it over here. It's
Yeah.
fascinating, I
It is
think.
absolutely
And all of this is very positive, I think, for our world. I think there are some exciting things out there and some exciting people.
for sure.
I get a lot of what I watch is again through social media and YouTube, and I love watching it that
Yeah.
way. So I think we can safely say that there's, yes, there's some challenges, but there's also some huge positives
Mm,
of for your generation
for
and the
sure.
generations to come. But just getting back to some of the lighthearted, because as I was prepping this conversation, I honestly haven't laughed so much,
Yeah.
which has been a very good thing for me.
Hmm.
What would you say? What would you say if you imagine you had your friends around the table?
Mm.
What's the most ridiculous stereotype about Gen Z that you've heard?
Oh, interesting. Mm, I can't think of one directly off top. I think the whole fluffy things is a good laugh. The fact that we basically can't do anything, that we're reactionary, we want to sit on our sofas all day and do nothing. I think that's harsh.
That's
Uh,
harsh.
and it's something that we get thrown at us a lot. Maybe not so funny, but it's definitely true that we get a lot of levied of being quite lazy.
Yes,
And
and
perhaps there is a bit of a case for it. I don't know because it's hard to
maybe
cut
not reliable.
generations.
I think that's the kind of thing.
Reliability for
Yes,
sure, I think could be a thing levied. Again, is that a Generation Z thing? I really don't know.
I
There's going to
think
be
it's ridiculous.
personalities across.
And
Everyone wants to
on
pick on us.
yeah, honestly, when I heard on it was on a news
Mm,
program, more perhaps case in point to what we were talking
yeah,
about. They said you couldn't pick up the phone and say hello.
yeah.
It makes me want to knock on the TV
But
screen.
I just think it's nonsense. I don't think it's a generation thing. I think
No,
it's a people
it's
thing.
a people thing.
People don't want to pick up the phone.
And I think some of it is simply ridiculous and some of it's probably fair.
Yeah,
But I
always.
think that I'm right at the heart of seeing how Generation Z operates,
Mm,
because you're my children and
yeah,
my children's friends. And I think for the most part, you're just the next generation grappling with the things that we grappled with in a different way.
100%. Exactly that.
But if you could replace every Gen Z stereotype with one word, what would it be? If you were going to shout down every stereotype and have your say, what would you say? No, it's rubbish because we're actually robust. No, it's rubbish because we know how to deal with technology. How would you shout them all down?
Uh, I would just say it's evolution. Evolution is the biggest thing that I would
There you go.
challenge to any of
That's your
these
word.
stereotypes. Evolution is a thing. We're all going to face new challenges, as you just said. There's challenges and pros to every generation we go through. We're just learning how to adopt to them the same as you did, same as dad did, the same as granddad did. So all of this, the criticism, perhaps. I mean, I don't actually feel the criticism. Maybe it's the same as other people do. Maybe I just ignore it
Yeah, good.
too much. But yeah, evolution of the times is the thing I would say.
And do you want no, what do you want older generations to understand about you? If you could throw yourself in the ring and say, "No, no, no,
Mm.
that's not true," what would it be?
I want them to understand maybe that we can learn so much from each other. I think we got first-hand experience in it. The Georgia being so young, growing up with granddad and with me as well. Neither of us know a life without him. That we benefited so hugely from
Yes.
multi-generational living. I think we could do so much better on that. You look at places like Italy. I think they benefit hugely from being around their grandparents and learning how to cook. That's a massive thing for them culturally. They learn the recipes of their grandparents.
Yes.
For me and for Georgia, it was learning how to mend things from our grandfather. Those are things we need to be really careful we don't lose just because we disagree with generations. So my biggest thing was instead of fighting each other constantly, I think we can learn from each other so much better.
Or sniping. I don't
Yeah,
know that we're really fighting. I
no,
think
but
we
that's
have
nice
this
for sure.
incessant need to say the next generation isn't as
Always.
good.
And we're victims of this as well. We will do the same thing. I have no doubt in the next 10 years.
I'm
I think
sure
I
you
already
will.
do it. So yeah, I think we can just learn to better each other.
Okay, so if you can sum up what life is like as a Gen Z, and one of the things that I hear being said all the time is that you're a Gen Z, no, but Z is American.
American. Oh,
And why are we
gutted.
calling our Gen Zs Gen Zs? That's not for you to answer. It was a rhetorical question. I don't understand it.
American
What would
shows.
you? Yeah, American shows. How would you sum up being a Gen Z? How do you feel?
I feel hopeful. I think there's a lot of challenges, but I think we can do so much. The best thing about the world right now is that there are so many challenges, and that means what's going to happen is we're going to generate so many good independent thinkers to create solutions to these problems, and that's a brilliant thing for us. We need to have challenges as human races to actually solve problems, and I think being around the people I can see that there will be those people. There's no doubt. So I'm hopeful. I'm worried, of course, as everybody is, that there's a lot of issues in the world. There's a lot of challenges in our personal life and personal careers, but we have to get through that. So hope, worry, and excitement for what's to come. I have no doubts that there's going to be some amazing things down the line. I really hope. So let's see. I hope.
Well, I have huge confidence in what I see with you and your peer group. I think we have every right and we should be hopeful because I see nothing but intelligence, desire to learn, commitment, and I think it's great. I think it's very exciting for us.
For sure.
And maybe the truth is that every generation gets knocked, and they get mocked for things. And maybe your iced oak latte is actually the millennials, say that properly,
Mm,
millennials avocado toast because that's what they got mocked
I
for.
do like an avocado
Yeah,
toast.
and so do I.
Yeah,
So that's a lingered thing. But I think we just have this desire to pick apart the next
of course.
generation. And for my part, I think Generation Z's amazing. And I think to our listeners, next time you hear something about Generation Z, they can't pick up the phone. They don't know what this means. And I have tested this
Yeah,
amongst
extensively.
extensively, and they all know what this means.
Yeah,
When you hear that they're lazy or entitled, addicted to their screens, maybe we should pause and ask, is it really true? Or is this just an easy label to make? Anyway, I've really enjoyed our chat today. Thank you for helping us pick apart the myths and
absolutely.
misunderstandings
It's been
about
so fun.
Generation Z. I hope that our listeners find something positive from it because I certainly have. So thank you.
Great. It's been such a pleasure, and I hope people can have a good laugh about it. I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Maybe to not take it all so seriously and have a good gig along the way.
It's a great point to end on. Let's just have a good giggle and not take it all so seriously. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here, for pressing play, and for sharing this space with me today. I created more moments to remind us that amidst all the noise, there is still room for real stories, honest reflections, and conversations that matter. If today sparked something in you, a thought, a question, or just a pause, I hope you carry that with you. And remember, your story isn't finished yet. Be as kind to yourself as you are to others. Take care of yourself, and don't forget, no one is you, and that is your power. Until next time, with love. If you're ready for more, the next episode is waiting for you right here.